Hello and welcome everyone to the third episode of our four-part series of conversations where we look into the continuing education of engineers. My name is John Kozowatz and I am a senior editor with Mechanical Engineering Magazine and ASME.org. Today's conversation will focus on how mid-career engineers may plan for post-pandemic work. Before the pandemic, engineers were in great demand across industries, and that changed somewhat as companies were forced to shed workers, including professionals and including engineers. So what do mid-career engineers need to return to work or expand their knowledge in a current job as the pandemic subsides and the hiring ramps up? Joining me today are three guests who will discuss all of this. Our first is Hailem George, who currently is Director of Talent Development in Black & Veatch's Global Human Resource Team, supporting professional development and career advancement through the design and delivery of compliance, skill-based, and leadership development programs aligned with strategic objectives and talent management processes. And our second guest is Michael Haradnachiano, an industry professor in New York University's Tandon School of Engineering's Department of Civil and Urban Engineering. He holds the Institute for Design and Construction chair. He's a registered professional engineer and is a well-known transportation executive with over 40 years of academic and industry experience and over 30 years in executive management. Aaron Seglia is the Director of Learning and Development at the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. As the director, Aaron leads the team working to empower the global engineering community with practical knowledge and in-demand job skills by combining ASME's industry experts with application-based learning design. So welcome, everyone. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors. Please make sure to check out the resource section on your console to get more information. So let's begin. In times of downturn, are mid-career engineers more vulnerable? And what can they do to make themselves more attractive to their employer? And maybe we can start with Hailem at Black & Veatch.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. So appreciate the opportunity to spend a bit of time with the panelists today and your audience. And it's a good question. You know, one of the things that we are constantly working to improve within our organization is managing that balance between supply and demand in terms of, you know, the demand side of projects and the supply side we have with talent. And it's a lot of science, but it can be a little bit of art as well. And regardless of what systems, you know, we or other organizations have in place, they're all a bit imperfect. And so, you know, one of the things that makes mid-career engineers really valuable are those that are finding that 20% time, or those that are raising their hand when they have a little bit of capacity. You know, maybe it's a slow time in their project, or they're coming off of a project and they're raising their hand and being open and ready for change and willing to engage in new opportunities. Those engineers that are flexible and are approaching those new opportunities with a growth mindset and thinking about how their past experiences and skills could be deployed into a new project, perhaps even a new business unit, a new market. Those are the ones that are really valuable to us, because that gives us optionality, right? It gives us a chance to take an individual and move him or her around the company and help us do a better job as an organization of balancing that talent we have with the demand that we have from our clients and our projects.
Okay. Dr. Haradnachiano, I apologize.
Yes. Well, I would say that, and I'm going to say it in slightly different words, but I don't think I am actually much different from you, Hailem, but versatility is the word that comes to mind. And I will tell you, because I started out of college in New York in 1971. And I quickly realized that versatility actually held the important role. I could be a structural engineer, I could be a highway engineer, I went out to the field, whatever was necessary, I made myself available. And yes, I held my hand up and I said, if you have an assignment, I will take it. And that allowed me to actually stay with the company at the time. Then the other important part is what I believe is part of the training that I'm also providing right now to students: leadership and ethics. People are looking for leaders. You don't necessarily have, you don't have to have a position that is called the leader in order to have leadership. But you have to be willing to compromise. You have to be willing to do certain things that are not the norm, and be willing to change when needed, and tackle issues that you have never tackled before. That was going to make you, in effect, a very worthwhile employee to have.
All right. Aaron Seglia, what can mid-career engineers do to make themselves more attractive to their employers?
Well, I certainly agree with everything that's been said so far, so I won't repeat what has been said, but I do want to point out a couple of things. I agree with the diversification of their sort of skill set, and the two places where I think diversification of their skill set are important. One is with respect to collaboration and communication. Particularly when you start to think about who you're working with on these project teams and in your corporations, especially when you start to bring in interdisciplinary teams. It's important to recognize that engineers don't necessarily speak the same language as business folks or marketers or finance people. But in order to be a successful mid-career engineer, you really need to be able to communicate with all of the different folks that you're going to engage with. And another thing is business acumen. You know, engineers typically end up following a very rigorous curriculum, you know, coming through higher education, eventually in their early career, really fiercely focused on the technical aspects of engineering. But as you grow in your career, the ability to kind of expand into leadership, management, and other financial and legal aspects even of an organization is important, especially as you look to go from being an individual contributor to a manager. And the last piece I'll mention is, you know, it's ironic that, you know, we're talking about mid-career engineers being potentially vulnerable because they're not quite advanced engineers and they're not early career engineers. But I see this as an opportunity as well as a challenge. Yes, it's a challenge to be in that middle crew, but I will say that as leaders and talent development organizations are looking at succession planning for their advanced career engineers, the mid-career people are the ones who are most likely in line for succession. And so I see this as an opportunity for mid-career engineers to step up to the plate, learn, and take advantage of mentorship opportunities and other programs offered by their teams in order to grow into that advanced level.
Very good. And Eileen, Black & Veatch does have a fairly aggressive program on just that. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about how you how the company, how Black & Veatch gets their people into these classes that you offer.
Yeah, be happy to do so. The thing about, and I appreciate Aaron and Michael's comments there too. I would amplify their comments, and that some of the things that they're speaking to, we think about in terms of, you know, leadership capabilities, sales capabilities, business acumen as being those more enduring capabilities that are transferable to whatever role that mid-career engineer may be taking on. And so that's certainly an important piece to develop. And I'll speak to some of the programs that we have in place to develop those. The other is recognizing that that mid-career professional is wildly valuable to the organization too. And it's because of what we're talking about already, and that mid-career professional still, has very relevant technical chops and skills that are applicable to the projects that he or she has in hand. And they're also leading, right? Sometimes that mid-career professional does in fact have direct reports. And so they're this nice mix between a leader and a doer. And that's really valuable because it creates great flexibility for how we utilize that talent in the company. Some of the programs that we have in place to develop that talent, we've got different programs focused at different career levels. So we have a program called our EDGE program, which is targeted at early career professionals. And this is a program that allows very intentional rotations for professionals across different business units and different roles in the company to try to rapidly create that broad set of experience that's going to create a strong foundation for them to build upon. We've got programs like Dimensions that are focused at more that mid-career professional, someone that has maybe had several years of experience and may not be sure what step they want to take next. We've got some automated intelligence and then manual mentoring that we can put in place for those professionals to help advise and inform them on what options may be available and what steps they can take to achieve those options. And then we have a very robust succession planning program in place that Aaron mentioned as well, at all levels of the organization, and targeting both those that are in key technical roles and those that are in more general leadership positions as well.
Okay. If I may add to what has been said, number one, and I did not mention it, one of the classes that actually I'm teaching is obviously ethics, leadership, and as well as communication. And one of the things that I observe over the years, and I've been on and off teaching also as an adjunct from time to time, but the inability of engineers to actually being communicators. The people that you see today at the higher levels are people that are able to address a topic in a very succinct and clear fashion that people can understand. And that's not the strength of engineers. Engineers tend to, and I have seen it over the years, they will say, let me have a computer, let me give you a corner, don't bother me, I'll get whatever you want done, just tell me what you want. And that's not a leadership position. This is something that, okay, I'm a technician and that's what I do. And if you look at the people that actually move up in ranks and eventually become, let's call it managers of people, are the people that are able to communicate and as well actually lead others. But leadership, as far as I'm concerned, is something very important. Lead by example. Don't ask anyone to do something that you are not willing to do yourself. Now, the ability to communicate would also allow you to create trust. And trust to me is the ultimate thing that engineers need to realize that they need. You need your client, you need the people to trust you. You're not a politician, you're just a technical person that is going to need to convey things that will be trusted. And many times engineers tend to represent government. And the question is, when you represent government and government knocks on your door and said, I would like to, I have something for you, normally you should shut the door and run away. Because what government is normally very good at collecting taxes and doing other things. So it's very important as engineers to have, to also be ethical in the way you behave. So therefore, and that's learned are very early on. In the mid-level engineers, the one from 4 to 6 years, that's the time that you have to acquire these skills. And the times that are not necessarily good times for engineers right now, in which you struggle because there is not enough work, there is enough competition, it is important that these values be instilled and be taught, because that's not what a school teaches you, how to be a leader or how to be trusted. And one struggles, and I see the students struggling. When I teach, I ask students to make presentations and write reports for real. I mean, I look at it and said, hey, if you are my employee, I would actually, you're not gonna get a good grade on that. So the question is to teach them as to how to be able to express themselves. And expressing themselves is not only verbal, it is in writing and in front of people. So that's something that to me is critical for the mid-level engineer to be successful. Just being, you should be quiet when you need to, but otherwise you should speak up and volunteer. Just being quiet all the time is not gonna get you too far.
Okay. Okay, Aaron, retraining or upskilling, cross-skilling, is it an obligation on the part of a company, on the part of employer, or is it just common sense for the particular engineer to plan to do this as they're developing their career, and maybe how has technology helped in this?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I see it as there's an equilibrium that occurs between self-directed learning as well as, your corporate or your employer's directed learning. And of course, you need to do what your employer requires in terms of, table stakes training on everything that's required based on your state or jurisdiction. But, I think it's a combination, and it's a give and a take. So if an engineer wants to grow in a particular direction, whether it's toward leadership or towards being a manager versus deeper technical expertise, they've got to communicate that to their manager and advocate for themselves, right? But at the same time, the employers have to have that dedication to nurturing and evolving someone's career so that succession planning is possible, so that there is the next group of leaders in the organization, whether it's a leader of a project team or the leader of an entire staff, And so I see it really as a give and a take. And what's most important, in my opinion, to the mid-career engineers is to always be committed to lifelong learning, whether it's formal or informal training, whether it's official classes or it's, YouTubing and very social or casual kind of learning. But very much to Michael's point, we always learn by exploring new topic areas and grow as a result and make us more versatile. So that's my thoughts there.
John, if I may, I'd like to add a comment as it relates to upskilling and reskilling as well. It's an area that I'm quite passionate about, and for a couple of reasons. One, it makes good business sense for us. It makes good business sense for the individual. So to be that lifelong learner and recognizing that as individuals, our time in our careers is actually increasing. And we know that the shelf life of our technical skills and of technologies is decreasing. So we're going to have to continue to reinvent ourselves and upskill and reskill throughout the course of our careers. It's good for the business, back to that balancing supply and demand piece. But then what I really get passionate about is, as a leader in the business, I truly believe there's no better way for us to show that we care about our professionals and their well-being than to invest in their upskilling and reskilling, particularly in the current environment we're in, the challenging economic environment we're in. If we're able to make investments and upskill and reskill professionals and keep them relevant and keep them busy and keep them employed, that's one of the best things, if not the best thing, that we can do for their well-being. And so that's really something that that gets me up in the morning and motivates me and our team for the work that we do to upskill and reskill and help allow professionals to move around the business.
And what career skills are needed, in your opinion, for advancement?
Yeah, we've talked about some of them. The way that we view upskilling and reskilling is we think about skills and capabilities. So skills being those, they're timely, they're relevant to the project work at hand. They're oftentimes technical in nature. So having a good basis there that aligns with the work you're being asked to do is really important. And then capabilities are things that are a bit more enduring and transferable across roles. So we've talked a bit already about leadership capabilities, and in particular, being able to rapidly form teams, being able to lead those teams in a distributed workforce environment. We're all working in new ways as a result of the pandemic, and so having capabilities to lead in that distributed manner is really important. We talked about business acumen earlier. I would add a +1 there. One that we haven't talked about yet, that I think goes back to your first question as well, as to how those mid-career professionals can remain relevant and critical to a company's workforce, is sales and client relationships. So the ability to build those relationships. We talked a bit about trust, establishing trust with clients, and the ability to go from a role on a delivery team to unlocking new business opportunities and driving growth. That's a capability that's that's certainly important and very critical right now.
It was an interesting point, I think, that you just made about your technological skills decreasing. Meaning, I guess, that technology is advancing so fast that it's very hard to stay on top of. So, Michael, you're in the education business at NYU. How do you prepare your students for such a fast level of technological development?
That's a challenge, I would say. There is, but it ought not to be a challenge for the mid-level engineers today. It is more of a challenge actually for people that allow themselves to become obsolete because they stayed purely technical over many years, and they're little by little being replaced by sometimes by faster, better, and smarter computers. And that's something that as you become older, I would say, your computer skills are kind of old as well. I know that my grandkids can do much more with computers than I can. So that's a given. However, here is what I believe we need to do in terms of getting people from an educational point of view to overcome that and really focused on something that is very important that I think you have touched upon, but not necessarily in the same way I would have touched on. The people that rise to high positions eventually in corporation are the one that can go out and get work. You'll always find people to do the work. It's very hard to find people to get the work. Getting the project is critical, and that also allows one for growth because now you are a person that generates jobs. And there are people that do the job and there are people that generate jobs. So having the ability to lead, doing it in an ethical fashion and communicating are the things that I try to teach. As you know, I do teach technical stuff too, but the important part, the technical stuff is absorbable by most engineers with no problem. The part that is tougher is the leadership, what's ethical and what's not. You cannot really teach morals. You can teach ethics, but not morals. At least that's my view.
All right. Aaron, tough act to follow there. Talk about a little bit about career skills that are needed for advancement for mid-career, inside or outside of an employer.
Well, on top of everything we've talked about so far, I would add that there are, if you think of categories of skills and competencies, we talked about business acumen and we've talked a lot about ethics and so forth, but there is what we find at ASME directly is there's really what we call industry and application awareness, which takes you a step further into your engineering career path. And I'll explain. So once you understand, for example, let's just say you've graduated and you're in career as a petroleum engineer. Once you're working as a petroleum engineer, you really need to understand the industry that you're working in and the applications that you're working in, as well as any government or federal or even jurisdictional regulations. So for example, what does it matter? How does this apply to the Department of Energy policy? How does it apply to regulations? If you're if you're working in the aerospace industry, what are the regulations of the FAA? If you're working in the medical device industry, how does the FDA play in this game? So again, really being deeply aware of how you work within a specific application or a specific industry is a way to continue to grow and develop more deeply into the technical space, as opposed to more deeply into the managerial or leadership space.
All right.
It's interesting. I'm sorry if I may. If you
Go
think
right
that you talk about regulations, and I am very much aware that according to the regulation in general, the regulations come from the government and various agencies that are actually government driven. And they're there to protect us, and absolutely correct. But they're also ought to be looked at as a challenge to see how we can innovate. Regulations many times stifle advancement because they said, you can't do that. Wait a moment. Yeah, we have a standard. Well, my view as an engineer, and I was pretty successful at what I've done, was I'm gonna look to be innovative. I'm gonna look to see what I can do. Put aside, according to the regulation, I cannot do anything. If I only have to follow exactly how the regulations were given, then you need a robotic arm to do it, because you don't have to think, you just do whatever someone tells you to. And that's counterintuitive to what an engineer that is in leadership need to do. You need to look to ways to improve on all of these regulations. You don't have to actually disobey the regulation. You just need to look at it creatively to see how I can actually apply my knowledge, apply my creativity, get this thing done without violating this, but without having to follow that like a robot. And that's critical in my mind to what you want from an engineer. And the younger they are trained to think creatively, the better it is, because you need that creativity going forward.
Eileen, how does a company like yours promote or nurture innovation?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question, John, because I think that's how I would characterize what Michael is describing is one of the skills for advancement is just that, innovation. And we know that engineers are, some of the most innovative, creative folks that are out there. And one of the reasons for that is to be innovative, you actually need some of those constraints, whether it's, regulations or other drivers of those constraints. What I think is required for innovation in large organizations like ours is a mechanism for that innovation to occur. Our company is a project-based company, as most ENC firms are, And oftentimes in the context of executing those projects, it's difficult to create space for professionals to step away and look at opportunities to do things differently, better, enter new markets, develop new products, new services. Now, we know that through the course of that day-to-day work, there is all kinds of simple innovation that's happening all the time. But for some of the breakthrough stuff, I really believe you do have to have a mechanism where folks can step away and pursue those things outside of their normal day jobs. And so we have a number of those mechanisms in place at our organization. Oftentimes for our field construction personnel, we've got lean programs. So they're more of the more simple innovation in terms of see it, solve it. You know, how can we drive efficiency, reduce waste as it relates to execution out in the field. We have other programs for more complex innovation, but still related to day-to-day projects, utilizing tools like business process management, Six Sigma, some simple innovation techniques. We call the program Business Excellence. And it's a means by which professionals can identify an opportunity and then receive a bit of upskilling in some of those methodologies to figure out how to deploy those tools and techniques to go and solve a problem. So the problem may be known, but the solution is a bit unknown. And then finally, we've got innovation that's exploring new products, new services, and new markets. And so this is very much out in the entrepreneurial space. It also includes collaboration with other organizations, at times even early stage startups and entrepreneurs. And this is looking at opportunities where we can take some of our core competencies as a company and grow into new areas. And so it's really exciting to me because it provides outlets for professionals to be innovative inside or in the context of a large organization.
By the way, one of the things that I would say that is very important part of the training is I call it MBWA, manage by walking around. That means if you're going to get something done, don't tell me you're going to do it from behind your table, your desk, and then you say, oh, I'm so not knowledgeable.
So Aaron, career skills, if someone is not employed or is in a firm that seems to have a dead-end position, how can a mid-career engineer go about acquiring those now?
How? So that's, well, I mean, there's obviously, a very large spectrum of available ways to attain skills. Everything from additional advanced degrees to micro credentials, which are very common and popular at the moment, as well as training in specific, topic areas or, course areas. The other thing is the time and expense. They have to kind of decide for themselves if they're in this little to no nurturing and enrichment from their employers. They've got to decide on their own if they're going to make the investment from a dollar point of view and an hourly point of view, if they can do this in their own time. And I think it really comes down to return on investment. What are they trying to achieve? What is their goal? And what do they think they're going to gain as a result of doing this? And really, what's their target? So whether it's to get another job at another company that's very similar to what they already have, that's one direction. And then there's also the ability to pivot into adjacent fields. So if I'm working for an oil and gas energy company, I might pivot to a wind energy company, and what is the sort of delta between what skills I have versus the skills that I want and need. And so it's really about self-assessment. What are their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? What are the options to accomplish that pivot, and where are they headed? And there's no right answer for everybody. I think it's a very individual direction. So I realize that's not exactly the exact skills that is being looked for, because I think it really varies person to person.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, that's been a good discussion, but we're going to have to leave it there for now. So I want to thank you all again for participating, and remind listeners that the next conversation in this series will be tomorrow on March 25th, and we'll focus on labor and skill gaps in the engineering workforce. So again, thanks to all of our sponsors, and please make sure to check out the resource section on your console again to find out more information. Thanks all for tuning in, and we hope you join us in our next conversation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.